The letter arrived on a Tuesday, printed on expensive cream stationery, with the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo embossed at the top. Notice of property encroachment, it read, claiming my newly installed fence violated community standards and, more shockingly, that it sat on HOA-owned land. I almost laughed until I realized they were dead serious about taking my fence. Have you ever received a letter that made your blood boil? One so outrageous it left you speechless. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, I'm guessing you have. Drop your own HOA horror stories in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this madness. My name is Mark, and I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for 7 years. It's one of those cookie-cutter Northern California suburbs where every third house has a Lexus in the driveway, and the lawns are unnaturally green. The houses are all variations of beige with red tile roofs, and the HOA, led by the imperious Brenda Thompson, rules with an iron fist. The fence in question wasn't just any fence. After saving for 2 years, I'd commissioned a custom redwood fence with decorative lattice work along the top. It had cost me nearly $8,000 and was the pride of my backyard. More importantly, as a property surveyor by trade, I had personally verified the property lines before installation. The fence was 6 inches inside my property line on all sides, a precaution I always take with clients and myself. I picked up the phone and called the HOA office. "Brenda, it's Mark Peterson from Oak Street. I received your letter about my fence." "Ah, yes, Mr. Peterson," she replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need to discuss the removal of that fence immediately. It's in violation of several community standards." "With all due respect, Brenda, my fence is entirely within my property lines. I had it surveyed before installation." There was a pause on the line. "The board has determined that the land where your fence sits is actually common property, Mark. You'll need to remove it within 30 days or face fines of $100 per day." I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "Brenda, that's not possible. I have the original plat maps for this subdivision. That land is unequivocally mine. The board has spoken, Mark. Don't make this difficult." The line went dead. If you're watching this and feeling that familiar frustration with bureaucratic overreach, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. When someone in a position of minimal authority tries to take what's yours, it strikes a primal nerve. The next day, I pulled out my property records and the original subdivision plats. Everything was in order. My property lines were clear, and the fence was well within them. I took photos, made copies, and prepared a formal response to the HOA board. At their monthly meeting, I presented my evidence. Brenda sat at the head of the table, flanked by her usual sycophants, Jerry from the Finance Committee and Patricia, who apparently had nothing better to do than measure grass height. "Thank you for coming, Mark," Brenda began, not bothering to look up from her papers. "We've reviewed your materials, but they don't change our determination." "But these are the official county records," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They clearly show the property lines." Brenda finally looked at me, a thin smile playing on her lips. "What you're not considering, Mark, is that when this subdivision was established, there was an easement granted for future community expansion. Your fence sits within that easement." I blinked. "That's not possible. There's no mention of such an easement in my deed or any of the documentation I received when I purchased the house." "It was in the original covenants," Jerry chimed in, pushing, his glasses up his nose, "buried in Section 7, Paragraph 4. I've read those covenants, cover to cover," I countered. "No such easement exists." Brenda's smile widened. "The board has spoken, Mark. The fence comes down or we'll begin levying fines, and if those aren't paid, we'll place a lien on your property." I left that meeting feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. They were either lying or had manufactured documents to support their claim. Either way, they held the power and they knew it. For those of you who've been in similar situations, you know what I'm talking about. That feeling when you're in the right, but the system is stacked against you. Keep watching, because what I discovered next changed everything. The following week I received the first fine notice, $700 for failure to comply with HOA directive. I knew this was just the beginning. If I didn't act quickly, they would continue piling on fines until I was forced to either remove the fence or face serious financial consequences. That weekend, instead of enjoying my backyard as planned, I drove to the county records office. I needed to dig deeper into the history of my property and the subdivision. As a surveyor, I knew that property records could sometimes contain surprises, oversights, errors, or details that had been overlooked. I spent hours poring over old plat maps, deeds, and subdivision filings, and then in a dusty box of original documents from 1998, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. When Willow Creek Estates was first developed, the developer had intended to build the clubhouse on a different parcel of land. But due to soil testing that revealed instability in that location, they had moved the clubhouse to its current site without properly updating the final plat map. The clubhouse and surrounding land, including the pool, tennis courts, and parking area, were still legally part of the lot designated for what became my house. The error had never been corrected, and when my property was sold years later, the deed included the original legal description, which encompassed the land where the clubhouse now sat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I made certified copies of everything and drove straight to a real estate attorney I knew from work. "Mark, this is extraordinary," he said, reviewing the documents. "If this is accurate, and it appears to be, you legally own the land under the HOA clubhouse." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, though I was already beginning to see the possibilities. "It means you have leverage, a lot of it. Technically, you could demand they remove the clubhouse or start paying you rent." I left his office with a strategy forming in my mind. This wasn't just about my fence anymore. This was about justice. The next HOA meeting, I arrived early and took my usual seat. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and addressed the board directly. "Brenda, Jerry, Patricia," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I've done some research into the property records for this subdivision." Brenda rolled her eyes. "Mark, we've been through this. The fence needs to come down." "I'm not here about the fence anymore," I continued, pulling out the documents. "I'm here about the clubhouse." There was a moment of silence as I laid out the copies of the original plat maps and deeds. I watched as Brenda's expression shifted from annoyance to confusion, then to dawning horror. "What is this?" she asked, her voice suddenly less confident. "It appears," I said, unable to keep a slight smile from my face, "that due to an error in the original subdivision filing, the land where the clubhouse sits is legally part of my property. My deed includes the original legal description, which encompasses that entire area." Jerry snatched the documents and began frantically reviewing them. This can't be right." "I had it verified by a real estate attorney," I said. "It's right." The room erupted in chaos. Board members argued among themselves, while other homeowners looked on with fascination. Brenda finally slammed her gavel, a ridiculous prop she'd started bringing to meetings. "Order! We need to discuss this privately. Mark, can we meet with you after the meeting?" I nodded. Of course. As the meeting adjourned, several homeowners approached me, whispering their support. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel alone. Here's where things took an unexpected turn. After the meeting, Brenda approached me with an uncharacteristically pleasant expression. "Mark, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice suddenly warm. "Perhaps we could work something out regarding your fence." I was cautious but willing to listen. "I'm open to discussion. Let us review these documents," she suggested. "I'm sure we can come to a reasonable solution that benefits everyone." For a moment, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Maybe they would drop the fence issue in exchange for me not pursuing the clubhouse matter. It seemed like a fair compromise. "I'll give you a week to review everything," I said. "But I want it in writing that the fence issue is resolved." "Absolutely," Brenda agreed, shaking my hand. "We'll be in touch." I left, feeling cautiously optimistic. Perhaps this could be resolved amicably after all. But here's the thing about power-hungry people: they don't give up easily. A week later, instead of a resolution, I received a certified letter informing me that the HOA was taking me to court to quiet title on the disputed land, both the fence line and the clubhouse property. They were calling my bluff. Now, if you're watching this, you might be wondering what I did next, because this is the point where many homeowners would back down, intimidated by the legal costs and stress of a court battle. But I had something they didn't count on: proof and the determination to see this through. I contacted my attorney, and we prepared a response. We also filed a counterclaim for trespass and for the rental value of the clubhouse property for the entire time I'd owned my home.